Welcome to Raw Talent, a podcast from Shore Capital Partners focused on the real work of developing people and building stronger organizations. In this series, members of our talent development team have candid conversations about what it really takes to grow leaders and strengthen teams. Talent development is not just a program. It's the everyday work of coaching, feedback, stretch opportunities, and accountability that shapes performance over time. Each episode explores the real challenges companies face when developing people and the lessons learned along the way. Welcome back for the second episode.
Here we go.
They weren't tired of us.
Yeah. Well, we don't know who's watching.
That's true. All right.
Yeah.
Well, today's episode is really talking about building leaders before there's a vacancy. Because oftentimes, if you wait until you need a leader, you're too late. And the reality is that oftentimes when we promote someone who's our best performer, we don't realize that just because you're good at your current job, that you'll be good as a leader.
Lots to talk about
Yeah.
there.
One thing that we can talk about to start would be, how do you start to recognize leadership potential early?
I mean, I look for it in little things. I look for it in the really good question somebody asks. I look for it in where someone's looking for context, not just what you want them to do. So if somebody's asking why, then that's just a little flag. It's like accumulation of these little things. I think when I see someone who you ask them to do A and B, and they give you A, B, and C, even if C's wrong, I don't care. That they thought what the next step was or could be and went ahead and did it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's all of these little moments of questions, context, doing a little bit more than just executing. If you're looking at someone in a team context, just watching how others interact with them.
Mm-hmm.
Are they able to step back and let someone else talk? Or do they have to be always the one that goes first? Do they have to be right when there's disagreement, or can they navigate those things? Do they ask questions of their peers, or do they try to flex and be the right person, or have the right answer with their peers? Do they behave similarly with their peers as they do with their supervisors?
Mm-hmm.
So if you start to see different faces of different, that's going to give a flag the other direction. So to me, it's these, we talked in the last episode about behaviors. It's this accumulation of small interactive behaviors that tell you how someone's thinking and how they are interacting with the world.
Some of what I hear you talking about is this ability to influence without authority.
For sure.
It's the ability to, go to your manager, go to your boss and say, I've had this conversation with XYZ people that are really my peers, my laterals. Here is their perspective.
Yeah.
Taking all of that into account, here's a solution that I think might work for all of us.
Yeah. Well, and even in that, there's if someone's coming to you with a problem and they include a possible solution or two, early career, you're looking at someone who's, you probably want to keep an eye on being a leader.
Yeah.
People who are just coming expecting others to fix stuff for them all the time, or they're complaining or otherwise, that's going to tend to go the other direction.
It's really this idea of seeing around the corners.
Yeah.
We say a lot. Talk a little bit about smart risks.
People hear risk and they recoil a little bit. Risk is, for whatever reason, more closely associated with danger. And isn't seen as a good thing. Risk is how you lose your job, or risk is how you get a bad performance review, or, and it's really backwards. I mean, if you just look at how people learn and how the brain works, if you're comfortable, your brain is triggered down, it's slowed down, it's in just sort of rote mode. You're doing without thinking. Well, you can't learn if you're doing without thinking. So comfort is an environment where we're learning. Comfort, we're not looking for answers. Comfort, we're not solving problems. right? Comfort, we're not probing for something different. We're just in it. On the flip side, danger, we go into protection mode, and our brain reacts defensively and wants to protect us. And so we shut down, or we close off, or we narrow our thinking to try to protect and so forth. Well, that's no way to learn either. So really, risk where there's a question and there's uncertainty, and you may be wrong. In fact, there's probably a good chance you are. That's the only place you learn. And as a consequence, that's the only place you grow.
Mm-hmm.
And as a consequence, that's where professional development lives.
And those are the people that you want moving into leadership roles.
Absolutely. You don't, I talk a lot about the accident that I see a lot of leaders with best of intentions make. And by the way, we're wired from our education to think this way, is to only reward excellence. So only the kids that get A's get recognized.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in a business setting, when and in a growing and evolving and changing and learning and acquiring business setting, if all you ever do is recognize and reward excellence, then you're incentivizing people who are willing to fail, either not to try that risk, take that risk, or to hide it.
Mm.
And in this environment, it's not, you have to have people who are doing that. And so you have to be careful. You want to incentivize and recognize healthy risk-taking, because that's learning. You want to recognize when someone asks a great question, even if we can't go that direction, or they come up with a great idea, even if I like the way you're thinking. We can't do that because of it, but love the way you're thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And we forget that when all we do is sort of recognize the perfect, that we're setting that up as the only way you get recognized.
One thing I heard you say just now that I want to dig into a bit is this idea of hiding it. One thing that I think is an early signal for leadership potential is visibility into work streams.
Mm.
So like making sure that your manager has visibility into the day-to-day work
Mm-hmm.
at the key moments and not just the outcomes.
Yeah. Yeah, and managers setting up that process to make it happen. But I think anyone who's not willing to show you their work
Mm-hmm.
is probably hiding something. Now, they may be hiding something for good reason, because you may have set up a standard and a culture where they feel like they have to hide something. But your ideal goal, I mean, as a leader, your worst case scenario is that someone who has a question doesn't ask it, and it has an impact on a customer. Or that someone who doesn't know how to do something just right is afraid to ask for help. Or someone who needs help, whether that's on a personal level or otherwise, feels like they have to hide it because they can't be, it's not an emotionally safe environment. They hide. All of that stuff's just a time bomb. So like as a leader, I mean, within boundaries, there are limits to, and there are things, oversharing is a reality, but transparency is part of how you build a culture that's willing and able to grow, and make mistakes and learn.
Yeah, I think if we think about building a bench and as a manager, as a leader, it's our responsibility to make sure we're developing and modeling that type of mindset for the folks that we support. And I think sometimes when we think about like visibility into a work stream, we veer into like this micromanagement mode. And that's not what we're talking about here.
No.
Like what we're talking about here is the ability to model for your employees what it looks like to get to these certain like big milestones of a project and then loop your manager in.
Yeah.
But we have to train them on that. We have to say like, when you get to X point, that's probably the area where you're going to want to loop me in.
Yeah.
How do you make sure that like your folks know what those milestones are and it's not just I did XYZ today?
I'll start by answering that. I think it was about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I was doing a session and I was talking about the importance of clarity and role clarity and goals and milestones and success measures, and that people need to know that so they can have the feedback loop that they're doing what they need to be doing, and that they're succeeding. And at a break after the session, I had somebody come up to me in the lobby of this hotel space, and he goes, listen, really, really enjoying what you're talking about so far, but I have a question for you. And he asked a great question. He goes, you're up there talking about all the clarity of roles and expectations and all of that. And he said, what's the difference between that and micromanaging?
Mm.
And I stood there and I was like, oh, come on, Anderson, get a good answer. And my answer to him, and I've used it since then, was my simple response is, if you're asking people not to use their brains, it's micromanaging.
Mm.
If you're giving them parameters in which to use their brains and their talents and their skills and their humanity, then it's not micromanagement. You're setting them up for success.
Yeah.
And to me, like that's the difference. If you're trying to control them to keep them from doing things or do things exactly the way you want to do it, rather than saying, here's the outcome, here's the timeline, here's what success looks like, go do it. Are you asking them to think, or are you asking them not to think? To me, that's the difference.
Yeah. One thing that's also important is making sure that as you develop leaders, as you think about building this bench, one thing that we want leaders to do is to have a very clear picture and vision of where the company's going, kind of forecasting what the business is going to need, both in the near term and the longer term. How do we start giving those reps to folks that we see this kind of like early potential in, to make sure they start to not only understand kind of their work in the context of their team or their functional area, but in the broader business?
I'll start with it from the perspective of like a upper manager, or someone who's wanting to move up in the organization. They're in a growing organization and they're seeing opportunity. No leader in their right mind, if Jackson, you're on my team and you're the best at doing X, Y, or Z, is going to promote you out of that role into your next opportunity and thereby create a vacuum behind you. So part of it starts with the mind frame and the incentive of the people who are leading people, managing people within the organization, to say, in a microcap environment that's growing the way we're growing, and you see the opportunity, you're not going to get the opportunity unless you can develop people behind you to step in as you step out.
Hmm.
And so if you're thinking about your own career development, then you simultaneously, in this context in particular, have to be thinking about somebody else's career development.
Hmm.
Because they have to be able to step up, and you have to be able to tell somebody and show someone, Jackson's ready. I'm going to step into this, but Jackson's already doing this thing. So he doesn't even need me anymore. And to me, that incentive, that core incentive to a good manager or early leader who is managing other people, aligns with this idea of creating an environment where professional development is the norm and the expectation, rather than either having people who it's for certain people, or it's really about my opportunity to grow, because we're running lean businesses for the most part.
Hmm.
And so you have to see the work. You have to see the direction the company is going. You have to know and imagine and have a conversation with your boss as to where you fit into that story. But then understand, if wherever you fit into that story, then who fits into your past story? Who fits into that? And like that creates this more systemic thinking about my individual growth and professional development.
What you're talking about here is really starting to touch on another topic I want us to cover, and it's this difference of leading versus managing. But before we talk about that, I want to stamp one thing too that we haven't touched on yet. I think it's incredibly important that your employees know what leadership capacities and competencies you're looking for in a promotion.
Yeah.
That's not just a checklist. They need to know that clearly and upfront, so that they are kind of striving towards those things.
Yeah.
And can attach the work they're doing every single day, not to just I did these 5 things, but I demonstrated X, Y, and Z skills.
Yeah. And I would, just to double down on that, I would say that one of the conversations we have often with our companies is recognizing that performance management isn't just about execution performance,
Mm-hmm.
because you can have a person who hits all their numbers on a team and everybody hates to work with them. So going back to our previous conversations about neural networks, those neural networks break down because nobody wants to work with Jackson. He's hitting his numbers. He's saying, I should get a promotion. I've done everything I'm supposed to do. Why aren't I getting a promotion? And meanwhile, everybody else is working around him trying to avoid him. So when you think about that, those characteristics, they have to be more than just execution-based or job performance or role performance-based. They have to be culture-based. They have to be team-based. They have to be development of yourself, growth, learning, as well as developing of others. They have to include, your performance management has to include more than that, or you're going to run into the situation where by the numbers, you have somebody who looks great and you put them into a position of power and they absolutely destroy your morale and your culture.
So with that in mind, let's shift gears a bit and talk about that topic of leading versus managing.
Yeah.
Like, why is that distinction so important to you?
Well, they're both required, but they are different functions, and the words get thrown around and intermingled all the time. Managing is about delivering and executing and performing in the near term. It's about clear roles and KPIs and delivering on those things and managing people and keeping people engaged and building those connections kind of at the team level. Leading is aspirational and vision-oriented and strategy and directionally focused. The reason they're both important and they're not the same thing is that if you have a company that has great leadership, they can inspire, people believe in the mission, they do incredible work. It's really meaningful, but they have bad managers. Well, what happens to the people working there? They feel completely deflated, like they're chasing a pipe dream. They're energized and motivated whenever that aspirational CEO is in the room and gets them excited with the big pregame speech. And then they get out there and they lose every game. That's demoralizing. If you can have great leadership but have bad management, you're not going to be sustainable as a high-performing team or company. On the flip side, what happens when you have great managers but you don't have any aspirational, visionary, strategic leadership? You have people who are doing the day-to-day and doing it really well, but no context. And so then they're doing a job. They become labor. And when that happens, it's hard to find meaning. It's hard to go home and feel proud of what you did today. It's hard to say, this is where we're going. So that's exciting. You just go and do and do and do. So these two sides of leading and managing, and they don't have to be different people. They're different hats that I can wear in any given day and you could wear in any given day. But you have to know which situation, which team, which moment calls for which, and make sure that you've got some combination of those in regular circulation.
So when we think about building a bench, making sure we have folks that are ready before the vacancy happens, one thing that has to be true is you have to have a culture of talent development in your organization. In your mind, what does it take for talent development to just become normal?
I'll go back to some of the same things that we were describing when you're talking about identifying early leaders. It has to be normal in any meeting, in any interaction between any combination of people in any part of the company to ask questions. It has to be normal to acknowledge when you need help. It has to be normal to be aspirational, to say, I'm here because I want to go there. Like that this is a place we're here going, we're building something. I think regardless of the role being tied, as we were describing before, to the strategy and the direction of the organization, that's all of this space between the thing that I'm doing and my maybe frontline, role or early manager role and this thing where the organization is going. Well, that's all this space for growth. And it's space, it's opportunity, and it's aspirational for people. And so that starts with there being those interactions where we're having the conversations we need to have. Our managers are trained on how to keep an environment that's not micromanaged, but is asking people to use their brains. It's welcoming people's hearts into their work, acknowledging that sometimes that means you got to deal with emotions at work.
Yeah.
And all of that stuff, it's like, to me, the more human we can be in our day-to-day work, the more likely we're going to build a culture that is driven and built around professional development. We don't have to tell babies and children, okay, it's time to walk now. We're wired, when we feel safe and we feel supported, to do those kinds of things. And we can do that in organizations as well.
Yeah, I think especially, you were touching on this a bit, but just to call it out, especially in high growth environments like ours, you have to name and normalize the growth reality. You have to, as frequently as possible, explicitly put in front of people, this company is growing, and as a result, the people have to grow faster than the company.
Yeah. And the company is growing, and yes, this is painful right now.
Mm-hmm.
My daughter last night was in awful pain, growing pains. We don't say, oh my God, there's a problem. Like, it's part of growth, right? Take some Advil, rub the legs, do whatever you got to do. But you don't create it as more than it is. Okay, we just tried this new technology upgrade and something went south that we couldn't have predicted. So here we are.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little painful. Let's figure out the plan to get out of it. Let's communicate how long we think that's going to take, so doesn't feel indefinite. Like, we can manage those things, and we can normalize that part of growth is discomfort.
Yeah.
Part of learning is failure. This has got to be part of the spirit of top to bottom an organization.
Yeah. Another thing that has to be normalized too is like the stretch reps. Like, we have to make sure that we're putting employees that have high leadership potential and capacity in situations where they are the facilitators.
Yeah.
They are the owners.
Yeah.
Are we getting them the right mentors? Are we making sure that they are paired up with folks in cross-functional projects?
Yeah. Yeah. And as a leader, my question is always, as I push back for people who are trying to transition into higher roles, is I need you to question, not does the thing need to get done, but do you need to be the one doing it? So it goes back to that. You're not going to step forward if somebody can't step in behind you. And there's this dance, this symbiosis between growth of multiple people in an organization. If you're running a meeting and it's like no big deal to you, and like it's kind of like just because your title says let somebody else run the meeting who's never run a meeting before. Give them reps doing that, right? If you're preparing the deck for X, Y, and Z, and somebody and to do that means that you're able to do that with opportunities that you can plan ahead. That's not a last minute, oh crap, let me dump this on Jackson thing. But it's thinking ahead as a leader and always looking at, where would this thing I'm about to do actually present that person a growth opportunity? Having a conversation or an email even with someone in a different functional area, or in a different hierarchy, a different level of the organization, that may make them nervous, and they might write it 6 times because they've never emailed that. Like, those are little moments where, as a leader, you're constantly going, should I be the one, or is this a safe place for me to step back? Should I be the one, or is this a safe place for somebody else to step up?
I think before we maybe close and recap, I'm going to share what I would, if I were listening or watching this, what's like an immediate thing I could do as a manager. And I'm going to ask you to do the same. But I think for me, it's what you're talking about. Before the end of this week, I would want to pick somebody on my team, give them a stretch assignment, be very clear about what those kind of parameters are in the stretch assignment, explain why I'm giving it, and then have 1 to 3 kind of like coaching questions ready to go, both on the front end and after the outcome.
Yeah.
What would you say could be like an immediate thing somebody does to kind of train?
My immediate for me is like, don't do something that you're used to doing. Like, I don't know what that is. And don't hold any sacred cows where there aren't sacred cows. I mean, we have a new team member on our team, right? And we've been doing certain parts of our program for a year, 2 years now, and have a pretty good rhythm to it. And it would be easy for either of us to say, no, this one's just fine. People love it. Let's just leave it be. It's fine. Well, then why did I hire somebody? if I didn't want their input, if I wasn't open to them doing it better or doing it differently, if I wasn't willing to take the risk to not be the one defining or designing or delivering on things. So like, to me, it's like, pick a thing as a leader or as a manager that like, it needs to be done, but you don't need to do it, or it needs to be done well, but you don't need to control it, and don't.
All right. So to wrap up, I would say my key takeaway from this is that, leadership potential doesn't come from current performance.
Yeah.
Leadership potential or readiness doesn't come from a title, either current or the one that you get moved into. It comes from visibility. It comes from stretch opportunities, and it comes from accountability and feedback, which I think kind of segues nicely into our next episode, where we're going to talk about what makes learning stick. Because oftentimes we can have this talent development culture, these strong professional development programs and situations that are context specific, but the learning fades.
Yeah.
So how do we work to make sure that learning starts to stick?
That'll be good.
Yep. If you enjoyed this episode, check out other Raw Talent episodes at www.shorecp.university/podcasts or anywhere you get your podcasts. Here you will find our Bigger, Stronger, Faster, Microcap Moments, and Everyday Heroes series, each highlighting the people and stories that make investing in the lower middle market unique. This podcast was narrated by Jackson Sprayberry, created and produced by Austin Johnson, editing by Podhouse Productions. This podcast is the property of Shore Capital Partners, LLC. None of the content herein is investment advice, an offer of investment advisory services, nor a recommendation or offer relating to any security. See the Terms of Use page on the Shore Capital website for other important information.